Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordian and Glory video. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. Rather than reviewing a new guard datasheet or tactic, I thought I would take you through the new channel Tyranid army that I've been working on for the last few months. This is just meant as a fun and chill hobby video. I want to show off the new army, go through all the new units, and also take you through the hobby journey that I went along to build up this force, because it's actually kind of a funny story. And so without further ado, let's absorb some biomass, create a shadow in the warp, and dive right into today's episode. Okay, let's begin with the army overview. Let me take you through all of these different units and show off what is in this force. I don't want to blue ball you guys. I know you're here to see the pretty models. So I guess we'll start off on the left and kind of work our way along. As you can see, this is a big old Tyranid swarm, with the vast majority of the models being made up of termagants. For anyone that is curious, there is precisely 240 of the little blighters in this army. In fact, there are 8 broods of 30 termagants, and we have 7 of those equipped with flesh borers, but we do have 1 of the broods equipped with devourers. Now, I appreciate if you're watching this video in 10th edition, you might be scratching your head and going, wait, squads of 30 termagants, how does that even work? I thought they maxed out at 20. Well, when I was buying, building and painting this army, you could take termagants in broods of 30. And as that was the original way I intended to run the force, I thought that's how I'd set it out. But just to be clear, if I was running this in a proper game of 10th edition, I would be running these in 20 Gant broods. I know some of you will also be wondering why I've got so many of the little buggers as well. To be honest, this army is not overly competitive. I didn't build it with any tournament tactics in mind. I just got it because I've always wanted a proper Tyranid swarm. I like the idea of a carpet of unending cosmic horrors, and every time you blow a hole in their ranks, that hole is filled by the time you've managed to reload your weapon. And so that was the whole vibe of the army, just that classic unending Tyranid swarm. Now, as for building and painting these guys, it was actually a perfectly pleasant and straightforward experience. These old termagant models are only made up of about 6 or 7 parts, and so they glue together relatively well. The only tricky part is the arms. I originally tried to glue the models together with super glue, but I found it quite tricky to line the arms up. So if you are thinking of building these older termagants, I do recommend that you use plastic glue, and I think that'll probably translate over to the new ones as well, because you've got to try and have the gun arm line up with the sort of carrying arm. So I think overall, the models, the body's really easy to go together, the head's really easy to go together. The only slightly tricky part is the arms, and really if you use plastic glue, it gives you a bit more play and allows you to, and it's got a bit more tackiness, so it allows you to line them up. And when I switched over to plastic glue, I found it much easier to build these guys. As for painting, these termagants were an absolute dream. Some of the easiest models I've ever had to paint. And the simple reason for that is there's hardly any complicated or extra bits on them. Unlike models like Space Marines or Imperial Guard or any other kind of humanoid soldier that has got knives and ammo pouches and loads of other bits hanging off, Tyranids don't. You've just got the skin and the carapace and a few of the feeder tubes to the weapons. But aside from that, there really isn't all that fine nitty-gritty detail that you need to get into. Now let me be clear here, because I know there's going to be some people that are interested purely in the hobbying and painting side of things, and they want as much detail as possible, and they want the challenge to be as hard as possible. These Tyranids absolutely have loads of fine detail on them. All I'm saying is you're not punished for not picking it out. If you decide to do them in a simple color scheme like I did, then that's absolutely fine, and they look brilliant and they look more than tabletop ready. But if you want to go into the extra detail, do all the little air holes on the side of the head, do all the different little magazines, different colours, and really pick out all the little bits, you can do. But if you choose to paint all the skin in one colour and all the carapace in another and kind of call it a day, they also look absolutely fantastic. Now you can't have this many termagants without a big mama bug to look after them. And in fact, I've got 2 Tervigons in this force. I really like the Tervigon model. I think that they look really cool. The head that comes with them reminds me of the Leviathan Reaper from Subnautica, which is one of my favourite games. And overall, I think they're just really big, striking and imposing models. Now, I built one of mine with the Scything Talons, and then I built another one with the Crushing Claws. There wasn't any tactical thought going into that. It was just because I like the Scything Talons one, and Mrs. Mordian likes the Crushing Claws ones because it looks like crab claws. So that's why I did it. Also, it kind of gives a nice bit of variety, and I don't overly worry about weapon loadouts and stuff when I'm looking at like a secondary army like this. Honestly, it was just really fun building the big bugs and trying out the 2 different loadouts. Now, speaking of building them, there's one thing that I want to make abundantly clear. These models might look big and complicated and scary and imposing, but they were an absolute dream to build. Oh my god, when I saw this thing, I thought from the box art, I was like, oh my god, this is going to be an absolute nightmare. It's going to take me days to figure out how all the parts go together. Nope. I built each one of these Tervigons in about 30 minutes. In fact, I did it live on stream, and I could not help but just keep commenting about how well designed this kit was. It looks like there's going to be loads of little bits involved, and honestly, there's not. Nearly the entire main body section is just 2 or 3 pieces, and the legs basically come as just 1 bit, and the Crushing Claws come as 1 bit. You've got a few of the extra little bits you have to put together, like some of these sort of, I don't know what you want to call them, like exhaust towers, breathing tubes on the back. They come in 1 or 2 parts, but honestly, it's just a surprisingly easy model to build, and it was a genuinely pleasant experience doing so. Another thing I just want to mention, especially if you're a new Warhammer player thinking of getting into the Tyranids, painting big bugs is actually easier than painting the little ones. With the little ones, you do have lots of little nooks and crannies, and you've got to paint so many of them over and over again. Whereas with the big bugs, you only really need to paint 1 or 2 of them, and because they're so much bigger, you actually find that their nooks and crannies are much more accessible with your paintbrush. So I found overall painting the Tervigons just really easy, straightforward, and the entire experience of the model was just brilliant. But in addition to the Termagants and Tervigons, we've also got 35 bases of Ripper Swarms to flesh out the Horde. Now, before you think I'm some kind of mad lad that's gone out there and spent my second mortgage on all these Ripper Swarms, they came free with the Termagants. That's pretty much the only reason I have so many of these things. I don't know exactly how many you get free in a box. If someone who's got a bit more experience than me could let me know down in the comment section, that'd be brilliant. That'll help out other people thinking about getting some Ripper Swarms together. But what I found is if I sort of spread out the amount of Rippers that I had, and I bought a few extra spare bases from eBay, then I was able to put together a huge amount of these little buggers for my army. I'm not overly bothered by the Rippers. They're kind of cute. They do have a couple of sculpts, but realistically, they're just a cool bunch of free models that you get with the Termagant kit. But let me tell you, what's much more exciting than the little Rippers are the brain bugs. And we've got the Warriors and the Hive Tyrants. Frankly, I find the idea of a bug that thinks offensive, but realistically, you do need to have a few of these synapse linchpins in your force to make sure that your Tyranids do as they are told. Starting off with the Warriors, I built mine with Scything Talons and Death Spitters, and I just did this because it's a classic loadout. It's one that you used to see on all of the box art, and I really like the look of it, especially those Death Spitters. I don't know what it is about them. Maybe it's just because they're big, but they're not ridiculously oversized, but they're not too small either. They just look like the perfectly sized weapon for the warriors. They seem to just scale really well with the overall model, unlike things like Devourers, which look a little bit weedy in warriors' hands, or the Venom Cannons, which look a little bit comically over the top. I feel like the Death Spitter just looks like it belongs on the warrior model, and so that's why I built them with those weapons. And I did exactly the same thing for the second brood of warriors, giving me a total of 6. Now, if I'm going to be honest, this is not enough warriors, not enough just from a tactical point of view, but also from my personal gameplay, aesthetic, how I want the army to feel point of view. I think that Tyranid warriors are a really iconic unit. They're a classic unit. When you think of Tyranids, they are one of those units that are going to pop into your mind's eye. So for me, when it comes to expanding the force, I plan on getting a lot more warriors in the future. And what's brilliant is, at the moment of recording this video, GW sells the Tyranid Boarding Patrol, and that comes with Gene Stealers and Warriors, which are 2 units that I'm really looking to get a lot of in sort of the second wave of this force. And I can say exactly the same thing about the other generic Hive Tyrant that I've got. This guy is equipped with a heavy Venom Cannon and a Lash Whip and Bone Sword. Now what's interesting is I actually, with the benefit of hindsight, wish I'd built this guy with the heavy Venom Cannon and the 2 giant scything talons. I do like the Lash Whip and Bone Sword guy, and I kind of just followed the instructions to build him that way, but I wish I'd gone for the scything talons purely for lore and aesthetic reasons. You see, the Hive fleet that I've painted my guys after, the colour scheme I've gone for, is Kraken, and they love their scything talons. It's one of the reasons I built all my warriors with scything talons. It's one of the reasons that I kind of wanted to build both of my turbo guns with scything talons before Mrs. Mordian came in and said she wanted one with the crab claws, so there we go. But if I was to rebuild this guy, I'd probably do him with scything talons, but I guess that kind of just gives me an excuse to get a 3rd Hive Tyrant, and this time give him the loadout that more suits the army. But speaking of Hive Fleet Kraken, that leads us on to the next part of this video. We've covered all the different units now, and I've even hinted at a few of the areas that I want to expand in the future. Now let me take you through the paint scheme for the army. This entire army is painted in the colours of Hive Fleet Kraken, the second major incursion by the Tyranids into our galaxy, and my favourite Tyranid colour scheme by far. Behemoth is alright. I actually personally don't like the Leviathan colour scheme, but Kraken are my boys. I think it just looks so bright, so vibrant. It really pops on the tabletop. Obviously, from my point of view, with battle reports and stuff, it really catches the camera. The camera loves picking out all the red colours and the greens and everything. So it just looks so good. And what's insane about Hive Fleet Kraken's colour scheme is it is unbelievably easy to do. I painted this entire army in 3 colours and some basing material. That's it. There's no washes, there's no highlights, there's no fancy zenithal methods. This is truly the noob's easiest paint scheme, and that's why I love it. So what paints did I use? How can you recreate this colour scheme? Well, I simply base coated my models in Wraithbone spray from Games Workshop. I just used a rattle can, nothing fancy like an airbrush. And then I painted all the red in Blood Angels red contrast paint. And then I painted all of the skin in Skeleton Horde. And then I did all of the green in Striking Scorpion green. And that's it. So all of this red carpet with all the different tones and little bits and shading, all of that was simply just one generous layer of Blood Angels red. All of the skin color, all of the tan, that was simply just one generous layer of Skeleton Horde. In fact, I actually ran out of Skeleton Horde at one point because I was painting so many models, and I switched over to Agaros Dunes on the big models, and I actually felt that worked really nicely because it made the big models look a little bit darker, a little bit more imposing. But side by side, it's very difficult to tell that I actually used 2 different tan colors in the Force. And for the green, I literally just did one layer of striking Scorpion Green. Now, little heads up with striking Scorpion Green, it's very vibrant. I went for it because it looked bioluminescent and I like that sort of jellyfish vibe. But you can see, if you look closely, it's a very thin paint. So from a distance, you can't tell. When you get up close and personal, some of the reds and stuff, when I was a bit sloppy, do show through. But overall, when you're looking at this army from 2 feet away on the tabletop, and when you're running so many Horde models, the sort of cohesive, collective quality of the paint scheme does seem to go up. And yes, it's not going to win any golden demons, but if you're looking to paint your new Tyranids, maybe you've bought that Leviathan box and you want to paint them in a really, really straightforward colour scheme, one that is an absolute classic and one that will really look quite striking on the tabletop, I highly recommend you check out the Hive Fleet Kraken. And if any of you are interested in a proper painting tutorial, I can probably put one of those together, do a little painting video. So let me know down in the comment section if you're a new Tyranid player or if you're just a new 40k player and you're interested in my super quick and super easy way of painting Hive Fleet Kraken. And when I say quick, guys, I'm not exaggerating. Each one of these termagants took me, when I was really in the zone, assembly line method, just going bam, 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 batch painting. Each termagant probably took me about 5 minutes to paint in total. I painted each Hive Tyrant in about 40 minutes. And the termagants in about 40 minutes as well. And the Warriors took about 15 minutes each. And the Rippers just took no time at all because they're literally just tan and red. So we're talking really, really quick turnarounds. No full days painting a single model. If you were to, even if you didn't go for quite as big a horde as this, because obviously the termagants take up the most time, because relatively speaking, you know, if one of these termagants takes about 40 minutes to paint, but to paint a full brood of termagants takes me about, takes me well over an hour. So obviously they take a little bit longer. But if you were to do a little bit more of a balanced force and have a bit of a swarm and a few more big bugs, you could probably, if you sat down, put an audiobook on or your favorite TV program, got into the zone, and just painted and painted and painted, you could probably turn this army around inside of maybe 12 hours. I think if you were taking it a bit easy and you weren't absolutely smashing it, you could put together a full Tyranid army, 2,000 points, easily in a weekend. Now, to be clear here, I'm not including the building time in that. I would say if you were to build and paint a 2,000 point army using this paint scheme, probably take a weekend to build the models and then a weekend to paint them all. But we're talking a 2-week turnaround on a full 2,000 point list if you build and paint it in this manner. Okay, we're now going to move on to the final part of this video, the story behind it all. And it's kind of funny. So if you've stuck around till the end, you are getting a little bit of a treat. This whole thing started decades ago when I was but a wee nipper. I remember reading battle reports in White Dwarf and seeing Hive Fleet Kraken armies and just thinking that they looked so cool. And I've always loved my Horde armies and I've always pined after a proper Tyranid swarm. To me, there is no other way to play them. Of course, you can run them as Nidzilla with all the big bugs. Of course. And I'm not putting that playstyle down, but that's not what attracts me to the Tyranids. I like the big swarms of bugs. And that's always been the case from literally, I remember being in a car journey when I was 5 or 6 years old and reading an old White Dwarf battle report and seeing the Hive Fleet Kraken models in that. And ever since that moment, I knew I wanted one day to get myself that big Nid swarm. And this only increased as I went into my teenage years and I fell in love with the films Starship Troopers and Aliens. They are truly some of my all-time favourite movies, and anyone who's watched my channel for any length of time, if you joined the stream, watched the battle report, my channel is completely infested and I liberally use quotes from both of those movies. Bugs! Bugs! Come on, you apes! You want to live forever? Haul all you got! All that kind of good stuff. They're going to come in here! They're going to come in like before, man! It's game over, man! It's game over! All of those quotes, man. I use them all the time. And it's because I've always loved the idea of humans versus horrible, gribbly aliens. However, despite this, in all of those cases, in all of those films, I was always rooting for the humans. So naturally, sir, upon sight of the Imperial Guard, I collected them. And 40k being the hobby that it is, it's quite an investment of time and money. I only really had the capability of collecting one main force. And of course, that was going to be my beloved Mordian 50th Rifles. But that all changed about a year ago when I started doing the Mordian Glory channel full time. Suddenly, I had a lot more time to spend on the hobby and start going after those projects that I've always wanted to do since I was a kid. So it was inevitable that I would want to finally get that childhood dream Tyranid army. And so for my 30th birthday, to commemorate the event and also to treat myself, I thought I'd pick up some Tyranids. Now, normally when you collect a new guard army, you might buy a common patrol or a boarding patrol, maybe a few boxes here and there, and a paint or two. Just dip your toe into it. That is not what I did. I decided I was going to go big or go home. So me and Mrs. Mordian went to Element Games, and I walked up to the guy at Element Games and said, I'd like some Tyranids, please. And he was like, okay, what are you looking for? And I said, I would like all of the termagants you have. And he looked at me like, okay, well, we've got a couple of boxes on the shelves. And I went, no, you misunderstand. I want all of the termagants that you have. And he looked at me for a moment and went, that's going to be a lot of termagants. And I said, I know, it's okay. They had to go down to the basement stock room, and when they came back, he came back with 2 of the combat patrols for the Tyranids and 14 boxes of termagants. That was everything that they had in stock at the time. And they also had a couple of termagants, so I thought I'd slap those on top. But the look on the guy's face when I was just piling up these boxes, like, yeah, that'll do. We went, yeah, that's 10 boxes. That'll cost that much. Went, yeah, but it's fine anymore. I think we've got a couple more back here. Yeah, that's 12. I think there's 2 more on the shelves and the display shelves. Yeah, they'll do. The look on the guy's face was priceless. I have never done that before. I'm normally a really careful hobbyist. I'm all about recycling models. I'm all about buying them from eBay, getting secondhand Facebook market groups. But I think in every hobbyist's life, if you have that opportunity, and I did have a little bit of money saved up, and it was my birthday, I think if you do have the opportunity just to go in and buy a huge army in one massive go, it's a totally unique and surreal experience, and I actually found it really enjoyable. My dopamine centers in my brain were having an absolute field day, and it just reminded me of that scene in Parks and Rec. And Mrs. Morgan actually pointed this out to me afterwards, because we've been watching a lot of Parks and Rec recently. And she was like, it's like that scene in Parks and Rec where Ron goes in and says, give me all the bacon and eggs you have. No, wait. What I'm worried you heard was give me a lot of bacon and eggs. But what I actually said was, give me all of the bacon and eggs you have. And if you want to see what that many boxes of NIDs looks like, I actually did a reveal video when I bought the whole thing, showing off everything brand new in box. And let me tell you, the pile of boxes is almost bigger than I am. So I'll link that episode at the end of this one for any of you who are curious about that. But that's all for now. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been a little bit different. If you have, make sure to smash that like button. And if you want to see more Tyranid content, then subscribe to never miss an episode. Of course, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. How do you think I should expand this army next for 10th edition? Sadly, I can't quite run this many termagants in the new edition of 40k, but I could probably get some Hormagaunts or something, maybe some G-Stealers. Let me know what other Tyranid units you would like to see in this army. Before we sign off, I'd like to say a massive thank you to all of my channel members and Patreons. It's thanks to their generous support that I'm able to do army projects like this, and to be honest, they are the lifeblood of the channel. I truly couldn't do it without them. But that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.